We are watching a slow motion train crash. Israel-Hamas war updates. Israel agrees to delay Gaza invasion for U.S. military to prepare defenses. That's right. Israel was planning on a ground invasion in Gaza, which likely will spell disaster, expansion, and escalation of war in the region. And worse now, they're going to hold off so the U.S. can prepare its defenses. Indicative of U.S. involvement in an expanding Middle East war in quite possibly the worst way imaginable. Numerous stories now coming out about U.S. deployments into the region, and it seems like we are staring down the barrel of a massive escalation, which many people are warning will lead to World War III. It's almost meaningless at this point, World War III. It's almost meaningless because it is a slow motion train crash. Every day we are watching a grain of sand into that heap, and it is getting bigger and worse. Words like yours or mine fall on deaf ears because these people in government are hell-bent on absolute destruction. And I think the Israel-Palestine conflict exemplifies this perfectly. Are the people of Gaza being benefited by the actions of Hamas? No. Will Hamas back down? No. Do the people of Gaza reject Hamas? No. Now, they say, these activists, they say, Palestine is not Hamas. That's fine. Fair point. The people of Gaza, the civilians, are not Hamas, but 51% support is the latest metric we have. At any rate, you have Hamas in Gaza attacking Israel. And you have these arguments about, well, Israel's airstrike in Gaza, et cetera, et cetera. That's never going to end. Many on the left, many anti-Zionists, they will argue that Israel is at fault. On the right, the people will say Hamas is the one who clearly started this. None of that matters. What matters is this. I mean, certainly that matters. My point is, in the greater picture of World War III, understand, at a certain point, you are only condemning yourself to death. And the question then becomes, what is the reason that you are taking these actions? Now, I know, hear me, my friends, I have talked a great deal, about the founding fathers who would sacrifice everything for what they believed in, and that I truly understand. But I want to make sure I exemplify the important point of winning. When it comes to these issues like Donald Trump's legal case, my attitude is rather disdainful towards those who have pleaded guilty. And the reason for this is we are in the fight right now, an ideological battle to win for the heart and soul of this nation. And if you are surrendering, but nay, flipping and turning on your allies and friends in your country, you've given up. That's something entirely different. If you are facing an inevitable defeat in which there is nothing you can do, perhaps leverage and negotiation is your best option. Perhaps that's the argument on an individual level for someone like Jenna Ellis. I don't want to get too much into the Trump politics stuff, but my point is simply this. World War III is a no-win scenario. Standing up for what you believe in is a win scenario. And that's the difference. I'm trying to get to this point. At a certain point, Hamas is not doing anything to achieve victory. They're simply destroying themselves to feel good. What are they going to win? This is not the path forward. This is a path towards defeat. And now the U.S. doing the exact same thing. But there is no answer. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. Western forces will give you every argument as to why they must. Eastern forces will give you every argument to why they must. And that's it. Both sides saying we cannot back down. Well, there you go. A collision course in slow motion. Here's the story from the Wall Street Journal. Israel agrees to delay invasion of Gaza so U.S. can rush missile defenses to the region. The Pentagon is scrambling to deploy nearly a dozen air defense systems to the region, including for U.S. troops serving in Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates. To protect them from missiles and rockets, U.S. officials have so far persuaded the Israelis to hold off until those pieces can be placed as early as later this week. Understand what they're saying. The news has reported over and over again now that Iranian proxies have attacked U.S. forces, dozens injured. It's bad. The U.S. is now saying, Israel, hold off on your invasion. Why? Because Israel is going to Israel is going to be attacked. U.S. forces will be attacked. Escalation will happen. So before Israel engages in this action in Gaza, the U.S. wants to make sure it is ready for full-scale war. Or, you want me to play a little bit more safely. They want to be able to defend themselves. But what happens if Iran strikes U.S. targets in response to Israeli invasions? War, baby. And I hope you're ready for what that means. Oh, you want to know what that means? This is Biden country. It means higher prices for gas. It means higher prices for food. It means higher cost of rent. And if it really does get to World War III, ladies and gentlemen, it means y'all gonna get drafted. Sorry, Gen Z. And if it really is World War III, that draft is going up way more, way beyond just 22. It's not going to be 18 to 22. It's going to go up to 40. And if it really gets bad, they'll take anyone. You're going to have 60-year-olds forming local militia to defend from attacks. Not that I think the U.S. is likely to get invaded or anything, but depending on the scale of warfare, welcome to hell. But I do want to stress, too, that turn of phrase. That quote someone shared on Twitter, I saw, it said, war is not hell, war is war. In hell, everyone around you is guilty. In war, everyone around you is innocent. And that's the terrifying reality. From military.com, Army air defense units from 3 bases are deploying to Middle East after 13 drone attacks. What should the U.S. do? Right? Let me ask you this honest question. You can comment below. The U.S. knows Israel is planning a ground incursion into Gaza. Why? To get rid of Hamas. Hamas just staged a massive attack on Israel, killing 1,400 civilians, taking hostages. What should Israel do? Israel's responded with massive airstrikes, which have resulted in the death of many, many civilians. And the most infuriating thing to me, the left saying, how dare Israel? The right saying, how dare Hamas? Well, I agree, how dare Hamas? But it's almost like people don't realize it's war. It's war. Hamas is not going to back down. They want all the land from the river to the sea. There's no negotiating here. What they did was evil, killing civilians and kidnapping people. It's evil, no question. Israel's engaged in military strikes in retaliation. It's resulting in massive collateral damage. I wouldn't call it evil. I'd call it wrong. I would call it more, let me put it this way, to piss off all the leftists, whatever, and the people on the right who are anti-Israel. It is not evil to defend yourself. The collateral damage is a tragedy. It is horror, and it is war. It is wrong, it is bad, and it must be stopped. But it's not evil. Perhaps it encroaches onto a degree of it. But Israel did not storm the gates of Gaza on October 7th and massacre a bunch of civilians. The left then comes out and says, yes, but before this, Israel did this, did that, did otherwise. Okay, it's war. I get it. There's no answers. We want the civilian deaths to stop. But there is a difference between Hamas intentionally targeting civilians and Israel blowing things up, which results in collateral damage. There is. I'm sorry. Both are bad. Both are wrong. One is a choice of abject evil, and one is more callousness. I don't know what to tell you. War will happen. What should the U.S. do? That's an honest question. Honest question. What should the U.S. do? If Israel is going to do this, the U.S. will be attacked. The U.S. must shore up its defenses. Escalation seems like an inevitability. There are a lot of people on the right who are critical of the left for calling for a ceasefire. I think that's silly and absurd. We want Gaza to stop. Hamas to stop firing rockets. They must. Israel then must stop bombing targets in Gaza. The problem? Hamas is initiating the rocket fire. I don't know what to tell you. I got no answers for you, my friends. I think Hamas is wrong to have started what they did. And now Israel's responding. We want there to be no violence, But if Israel does stop, Gaza ramps it up. So what is the world we live in going to be? Israel is forced to live under the Iron Dome as Hamas just fires rocket after rocket after rocket? I don't have answers for you, my friends. All I know is that whatever this is, it results in civilian death. And perhaps it is very naive for people to think that there is anything else but war. I know we want peace. But do you really think the people of Hamas will ever stop? No. And I know this is true. If Israel were to remove the security barriers around Gaza and say free movement for all, it would be a massacre of Israeli civilians. The Army Air Defense is deploying into the Middle East, and there's more. U.S. agrees to send 2 Iron Dome batteries to Israel. So there we go. The U.S. is directly involved, and escalation seems inevitable. In fact, not just inevitable, but we're watching it. Kaneko the Great tweets, the Pentagon is deploying 2 carrier strike groups, 11 Burke-class destroyers, a number of Ticonderoga-class cruisers, amphibious assault ships, THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems, multiple squadrons of fighter jets, strategic bombers, and undisclosed assets to the Middle East. The Pentagon expects Iranian proxies to continue to target U.S. troops in the region and has already stated they will respond decisively. What's the probability that this escalates into a war between the United States and Iran? The Pentagon says. Between October 17th and the 24th, U.S. and coalition forces have been attacked at least 10 separate times in Iraq and 3 separate times in Syria via a mix of one-way attack drones and rockets. We know that the groups conducting these attacks are supported by the IRGC and the Iranian regime. We are seeing the prospect for more significant escalation against U.S. forces and personnel across the region in the near term, coming from Iranian proxy forces and ultimately from Iran. So by virtue of our announcement over the weekend, we are preparing for this escalation, both in terms of defending our forces and responding decisively. This image, tracking the U.S. naval assets near Israel. Large U.S. naval fleet massing in theater, destroyer intercepts missiles. Some people are arguing, have stated, this is the largest NATO contingent ever deployed to the region. I don't know for sure, man. I'm not a military expert guy, and I can't tell you. But I can certainly look at this and say, hey, they're sending a whole lot of military and naval assets into the region in the midst of a dramatic escalation of war. So what say you? We be here, but humble chickens in the chicken coop as the world begins to fall down around us. Now we can say things, we can vote, and there's some moves, I believe, that have benefited us greatly. Electing Matt Gaetz, supporting Matt Gaetz, challenging this speakership. The fact that there is no speaker has delayed what may be the annihilation of major urban centers, maybe the world, who knows? Certainly, the military-industrial complex and its deep state assets in government are arguing that if we do not act now, the U.S. will be destroyed and will live under the boot of China. Sounds horrible. Sounds absolutely horrible. And you run into a battle of force of will and questioning where that line is. I don't see Gaza winning with their current course of actions. I do not see the U.S. or China winning any of this in their current course of actions. I had a conversation about Native Americans, and I said, it's really interesting how they decided to win. And they did. Now, do the Native Americans retain their ancestral lands? They don't. What about these protests where they go and they say, this is tribal land, and they lose? Doesn't seem like a winning strategy, does it? You know, a lot of people would say, if you stop the protest, you are giving up. I disagree. The Native Americans who built casinos waged war economically and won. Started buying back land, became extremely wealthy, and many of these individuals live better. Not that the Native Americans are doing very well in a lot of places. Some of the most impoverished places within the continental United States are Native American reservations. There's a lot that we can do to help, for sure. I don't like the idea of displaced people. I don't like the idea of sending booze to try and disrupt their lives. My point is simply this. Of the Native Americans who had been crushed by colonization, many have figured out a way to fight back in a way that wins. And that is, they built casinos, took the resources from the people, and then expanded and built more. And now many of them are billionaires. There are many people who say it is dishonorable. In war, there is no dishonor. There is only victory. My point is this. I'm not suggesting that the Palestinians build casinos or anything like that, because I believe it's haram. I'm saying you have to figure out how you win. And firing rockets, which are weak and get deflected, it's not winning anything. It results in airstrikes. But I tell you this, perhaps that is their strategy exactly. Because now Joe Biden has pledged $100 million. Now you have activist groups on the left pledging millions of dollars. And most of it funnels to Hamas. It helps the people of Gaza, no question. But Hamas controls it. Perhaps that's the strategy that they're using to win. When they kill Israeli civilians, people in the West send them $100+ million. There you go. And this will never stop so long as that's the case. I don't see this as a path forward for victory. And it's reaching a point where it's become untenable, and we may be dragged into a massive, massive regional conflict, which could bleed out into global war. I hope that's not the case, and I want it to not be the case. Drone attacks on American bases injured 24 U.S. military personnel. The U.S. will respond, and then you will get your war with Iran. I don't know what to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, but it seems like we are marching on this path, and there's nothing that's going to stop it. Everyone seems to want it, I guess. Perhaps it's because everyone's trapped in the machine. I remember watching this video where a bunch of activists staged just sitting on the lawn of like an oil executive's house. And he came out and sat with them and said, tell me what your concerns are. And they all talked. And they found that the oil executive agreed with them. Really? How could that be? These people thought the oil executive was some evil guy who was like, I'm going to make more profits and destroy the world. When in reality, he was like, the world lives and dies by fossil fuels. We want to find alternatives. Okay. So then they say, okay, well, look, we got to stop fossil fuels. And he says 300,000 jobs in this one area alone. Where do those people go to work right now if we shut this down? The argument, that doesn't matter if the world ends. Fair point. These 300,000 people here will die without access to heating and some air conditioning. Should we shut off their power right now? No, that's the problem. The problem is that even those within the machine can recognize we are dooming ourselves. If even this executive was like, look, I want to cut back on fossil fuel consumption too. It's too much, but these people will die. These people will starve and war will break out here. Give me your solutions. I need them. They don't have any. They don't have any. There are elements within the United States government who are probably looking at this like, how do we avoid war? But the only moves they see on the board push us towards war. The argument may be like, what if we totally disengage? War erupts in the region anyway. There were two arguments I covered yesterday, one from Ben Shapiro and one from a former military chief in the UK. Ben Shapiro says, if the U.S. is not involved, the conflict will escalate, Israel will retaliate, war will erupt in the region, and it will expand into World War III. The U.S. must go in and stop it now. The ex-military chief argued, if the U.S. goes in to try and stop this war, it will force Iran's hand. Iran will then strike, making this bleed out into a larger conflict. And, well, it certainly seems like there's no answer, right? That's right. There's none. Hamas won't stop. Israel will not tolerate being bombed by Hamas. Israel will retaliate. Leftists and other countries will not accept collateral damage from Israeli airstrikes. Iran is going to target U.S. bases in the region. Why? U.S. bases surround Iran. So what can you do? Did you buy your emergency food yet? I hope you did. Safeandreadymeals.com is who we typically shout out in our ad spots. I hope you did. I hope you did. I hope you did. We don't know where this goes. It may not be for years. It could be tomorrow. When the shot is heard round the world, you will never see it coming. I think it's fair to say you can see it coming now. But what I mean is, could it be tomorrow? Could it be a week, a month, a year, 3, 4, 5 years? One day you'll wake up and the news will report that the shots were fired. And then everyone breaks from the starting line. Like the man firing the pistol in the air. The shot is heard and everyone runs full speed to buy up all the toilet paper. Did you buy yours yet? My point is simply this. If it comes to this, you will not be prepared. I love this. People comment being like, Tim thinks he's prepared. I didn't say I was prepared. I didn't say I was prepared at all. I can only tell you that you won't be. Let's be real, there's a handful of people who are prepared. They could probably live underground for 30 years. But the rest of us, you're not prepared because you can only be so prepared. What I mean to say is even if you've got emergency food, water, and a first aid kit, and a backup plan, and a bug-out bag, and an emergency shelter, you don't know what comes next. You can be better prepared, but never fully prepared. I hope it doesn't come to World War III, my friends, but it does seem like right now it is an inevitability. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.